Welcome to the Deep Dive. We take the materials you send us, dig in, and pull out the key information to keep you up to speed, efficiently.
And maybe find a few surprises along the way.
Exactly. So today we're looking into a white separatist group called Volksfront. Our source material is mainly excerpts from its Wikipedia entry.
Right, and that entry gives us a pretty good roadmap. Origins, ideology, activities, and eventually its dissolution, in the U.S. at least.
That's our mission for this deep dive. Understand Volksfront from start to finish. Okay, let's get into the basics. Founded October 20, 1994, Portland, Oregon.
Correct, but the really striking detail is where it was founded, or at least initially organized.
Oregon State Prison, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
inside the prison, which tells you something about the founders, Randall E. Krager and Richard Arden.
Suggests they were already deep into this ideology before getting out.
Pretty much. It wasn't a post-release idea, and the source mentions Volksfront sort of rose from the ashes of older Portland skinhead gangs.
Like East Side White Pride, a group known for, well, horrific violence.
Exactly. So the roots were already there in that violent racist scene.
Okay, so that's the origin. What about what they actually stood for, their ideology?
Well, according to their old website, they called themselves an international fraternal organization for persons of European descent.
Mm,
You know, sounds almost benign.
almost. But the real goal,
Was to create an all-white homeland, specifically in the Pacific Northwest, and their slogan really sums it up. Race over all.
doesn't leave much room for interpretation, does it? Race over all?
Not at all. Very direct. And their symbolism backed that up, too.
The Elsa's rune.
Yes. The entry notes, it's commonly used by neo-Nazi groups, like the National Alliance.
It's interesting how these groups take symbols and twist their meaning, isn't it?
Absolutely. The Alja's rune had other meanings historically, but in this context, it becomes a hate symbol, a visual cue for those in the know. Creates that shared identity, but based on hate.
So a clear ideology, specific symbols, how widespread were they? Just an Oregon thing.
No, not entirely. In the U.S., maybe around 50 members. They had 4 chapters: Pac West, Central States, Northeast, and Gulf Atlantic. So small, but spread out.
And internationally.
Yeah, they had international reach, too. Another 50 or so members, roughly. Germany, Netherlands, UK, Canada, Australia, Spain. They had aspirations beyond the U.S.
And they weren't operating in a vacuum, right?
Well,
The deep dive mentions connections to other groups.
Definitely. They had alliances with Blood and Honor.
The UK group.
That's the one. And also the Hammerskins, a big U.S. skinhead group. These links help them share propaganda, recruit, hold joint events. It reinforced the whole network.
Right. And speaking of events, it sounds like they were quite active, not just online talks.
No, they had regular activities, weekend-long events, often with white power music concerts and speeches.
Sort of like rallies.
Kind of, yeah. Plus organizational meetings and somewhat grimly memorial parties for members who were dead or in prison.
And there was an annual event mentioned, the All Thing.
Yes, the All Thing, held at their place in Missouri, the Samuel Weaver Memorial Hall.
Samuel Weaver, Randy Weaver's son, from the Ruby Ridge standoff.
Exactly. Naming it that was a clear signal, tapping into that anti-government sentiment on the far right.
And All Thing itself. That name has history, doesn't it?
It does. It refers to the old Norse parliamentary system. Again, it's an attempt to cloak their ideology in this sort of bogus historical legitimacy, connecting to a romanticized white European past.
Creates a sense of tradition, however warped. Okay, now this next bit is, well, it's something else. Volksfront tried to join an anti-hate crime coalition in 2001.
It sounds completely bizarre, right? But yeah, the Coalition Against Hate Crimes, or CAHC, an anonymous email, supposedly from a member, suggested they could offer a unique perspective.
I can only imagine the reaction. They were rejected, obviously.
Outright rejected, yes.
Right.
Unsurprisingly. And the Southern Poverty Law Center weighed in, too.
What did the SPLC say?
They basically pointed out the obvious contradiction. Volksfront's goal was an all-white state achieved by removing people of color, completely at odds with the CAHC's mission.
So, likely just a cynical PR move. Or an attempt to infiltrate.
It certainly looks that way, trying to appear less extreme, perhaps, but it clashes massively with the violence linked to their members.
Yeah, let's get into that. The deep dive details several serious incidents, starting with the founder, Randall Krager.
Right. Even before Volksfront back in 1992, he was convicted for a really brutal assault on an African-American man, left him paralyzed, and threats against an anti-fascist activist, too.
And the judge noted his swastika tattoo in sentencing, didn't he?
Yes, the judge doubled the sentence because of it, seeing it as proof of racial motivation. Krager apparently disputed the details later, but the conviction stood.
Then there was the murder in 2003. Randall Mark Townsend.
Killed by Curtis Monschke, described as a Volksfront probationary member. Monschke got life in prison.
And the prosecution argued the motive was linked to Volksfront.
Yeah, they argued Monschke, who had Volksfront and swastika tattoos, did it to sort of prove himself or gain status within the group. Volksfront denied he was a member and condemned it, but the connection was made.
Grim. And the violence didn't stop there. 2007, an attack on a synagogue.
Temple Beth Israel, yes. Jacob Albert Lasky, allegedly their prisoner affairs coordinator, and his brother Gabriel were involved, threw rocks etched with swastikas.
What happened to them?
Jacob Lasky got 11 years in federal prison. The FBI called him a self-avowed white supremacist. His brother got prison time, too. It's a clear example of the ideology turning into direct action against minorities.
The source also mentions alleged involvement in the shooting of an anti-racist activist, Luke Corner, though no charges were filed.
Right, that remained an allegation. And even after the group supposedly dissolved, their name popped up again indirectly.
After the Sikh temple shooting in Wisconsin in 2012.
Yes. The shooter, Wade Michael Page, his girlfriend, Misty Cook, was later found to have past ties to Volksfront. It shows the overlapping nature of these extremist circles, even if the group itself isn't directly involved in an incident.
So a consistent thread of violence and hate, which maybe makes their dissolution less surprising. They officially disbanded the U.S. branch in August 2012.
That's what the source says. August 2012.
And the reason they gave?
They claimed it was due to constant harassment and investigations by authorities. Around that time, their website, blog, Facebook page all disappeared.
And how did the main anti-hate monitoring groups view Volksfront during its active years, the ADL and FPLC?
Both were very clear. The Anti-Defamation League called them neo-Nazi, one of the most active skinhead groups, and virulently racist, rebellious, anti-authoritarian, and anti-Semitic.
Strong words.
Very. The SPLC also designated them a hate group, consistently highlighting their goal of an all-white homeland achieved through deportation. So there was broad consensus among watchdog groups about their nature.
Okay, so we've covered the arc, prison origins, racist ideology, international reach, alliances, violent acts, and then dissolution citing external pressures.
It really paints a picture of how these groups form, operate, and sometimes fracture.
It does raise the question, though. What factors allowed them to gain any traction at all, even if limited, and what ultimately led to their downfall?
Well, the prison origin point is significant. Those can be incubators. Alliances helped. Shared identity, events. That builds cohesion. But the internal contradictions, being anti-authority but wanting a rigid racial state, plus the constant pressure from law enforcement and activists, that likely wore them down.
A sobering look, definitely. So to quickly recap, Volksfront, a neo-Nazi white separatist group aimed for an all-white Pacific Northwest, active internationally, allied with others, linked to serious violence, dissolved in the U.S. in 2012, citing official pressure.
That's the core of it, a reminder of the dangers these ideologies pose and why monitoring them is, well, crucial.
Indeed. And that leads us to a final thought for everyone listening. Considering Volksfront's relatively short run and their stated reasons for folding, what does their story reveal about the weaknesses, internal and external, that these kinds of organizations face? And maybe more importantly, even when a group formally dissolves, what's their lasting impact? How might those ideologies just shift shape and reappear later?
Something to ponder. These ideas don't necessarily vanish when a website goes offline.
It's exactly.
Yeah.
Plenty to think about until our next deep dive.